Welcome to RPI's CloudSuite Tech Talk series. My name is Keith Whalen, and I'm here to introduce today's presentation on CloudSuite for Healthcare. We have two very exciting presenters today. Our very own Michael Grace, who has extensive experience in healthcare as both a consultant and a client, as well as a special guest from Infor, Mr. Mark Weber, who is the Senior Vice President for Healthcare. If you enjoyed today's session, please be aware that we do Tech Talks every Friday at noon Eastern, and our schedule is available on the Work Out Loud events page. Also, please note that we encourage questions for our presenters. Just type any you have into the Q&A chat box at the bottom of the screen. We'll save them for the end of the session so as to not interrupt the flow of our presenters. And with that, I give you Michael Grace and Mark Weber.
Thanks, Keith. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm really excited about being joined by our special guest, Mr. Mark Weber. And with that, I'm going to let Mark introduce himself.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mark Weber. I'm one of the SVPs here at Infor Healthcare. I've been at Infor for about 6 years. Before that, I was at a large academic medical center where I was a user of what was then Lawson. Long background in IT, and very excited to be here today with Michael to be able to talk to you about a lot that we have going on in the Infor space.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark, for joining us. My name is Michael Grace. I'm a director here in our Infor practice out on the West Coast in our Phoenix office. And similar to Mark, I have a large background in the client side of healthcare, a variety of academic medical centers and children's hospitals, mostly healthcare for about 20 to 25 years in the Infor space. So today, Mark and I were thinking about, rather than running you through all the features and functionality of CloudSuite, we thought today we would just answer some of the most pressing questions that we often get when we're out talking to Infor Healthcare customers. And a lot of that is really, we get asked our agenda questions. So we're going to kind of do this Tech Pro Unicorn podcast style. And much like the political debates, I'm going to moderate, and Mark gets to be the only candidate, so he doesn't have to compete against himself unless he wishes to talk over himself. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to answer some of the most pressing questions that we get often from our healthcare customers, and those are, how are we lowering the cost around moving to multi-tenant? We're acutely aware that it is more costly than traditional upgrades. We'll talk about why we don't think an RFP is necessary. We'll talk about what the benefits are of going to Infor CloudSuite versus a competing product. And then we'll share a little bit, honestly, around what we believe some of the great benefits you can get around CloudSuite are that might inspire you to perhaps move sooner rather than later. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll start with our first question, and just a reminder to look for some of the Tech Pro Unicorn articles that'll be embedded as we move through this. But when we really get the first question always comes, wow, that's a bigger number than I thought. And we've taken note of that, I think, Mark. I think Infor has really done a good job of addressing it and really focusing on how do we take that cost and make it more economical, reduce the risk, and in some cases even reduce the effort. Could you share a little bit about what Infor is doing to help the customers out?
Yeah, happy to, Michael. And this is an area that we at Infor have been focusing on a lot. A lot of R&D dollars have been going on to addressing exactly these questions, because as Infor, right, we have an enormously large install base within provider healthcare. We're by far the #1 vendor within this space. So it is within our interest to make sure that we're providing a path for our clients to move to multi-tenant cloud at, safely, effectively, at a low cost, and be able to achieve, very high value and very short time to value. And so the things that we've been really focused on are taking the years of experience that we have within provider healthcare, and to bring that to this space to come up with a sort of pre-configured environment, a pre-developed install that will allow us to leverage, then have an install that brings you there more quickly, to leverage a lot of what we call implementation accelerators that give you the ability to take all the data and capabilities that you have today and move you into that environment in a more automated fashion, and to really allow you then, by doing so, not only do we get you there more quickly, we can streamline the training, we can streamline the testing, we can streamline all the areas that typically go into an implementation in a way that makes it, much more repeatable. And for you then, that means it makes it, much lower risk and much more effective, and of course shrinks the overall time, which lowers the overall cost. What Michael is showing here is what it means when you go into Infor's CloudSuite Healthcare. Number one, what it means is that we're designed for healthcare. So you're getting all the deep healthcare specific functionality that we've developed over years of working in the provider healthcare space. That means, functionality around, say, recall management, which is, as you probably can imagine, a much different thing in provider healthcare than it is in industries like say, retail. It means those best practices are built in. So we have a lot of experience in terms of how to do the core business processes within healthcare and how to do that in the most efficient way. And we've built that into these implementation accelerators and into the multi-tenant journey. And then that set of prepackaged workflows, content, integrations, analytics, all there available for you. We find that with multi-tenant, given the fact that you can now get a lot of your information on the screen versus doing things like running the traditional reports, by having those pre-canned screens and those pre-canned analytics, we've seen where we can lower the reports that people have had to have in the past by as much as 75%. So having to do less in terms of building reports and those kinds of things actually also greatly lower the cost of the implementation. This here is the overall cloud suite for healthcare. Really, we organize this in several different areas. One is those core business capabilities, right? So finance, supply chain, HCM, et cetera. But within that, right, are some of the healthcare industry specific capabilities I was talking about, like grants management, recall management, cost accounting, et cetera. And then we have aligned industry capabilities, things like budget planning, expense management. Those are capabilities that are pretty consistent cross industry that we've brought into healthcare. And all of that then rests upon an AWS cloud-based platform that provides a core set of capabilities around API gateways to better enable integration, not only within the Infor CloudSuite, but also between the Infor CloudSuite and other applications, and a host of capabilities around IoT, around digital assistance, AI, document management, et cetera, and all of that is then delivered by what you see in the lower right-hand corner, which is what we call Infor Agility. All of those implementation accelerators, prepackaged analytics, process intelligence for us, where we can help you identify where you have inefficiencies in your current workflows, and of course all the automated testing suites that allow you to test and regression test more quickly and more accurately.
And so Mark, I can't think of another package out there, right? And we don't have to go through the typical names of the competing products, but if you were to go to them and ask them for, the recall functionality and such, it kind of doesn't exist, right? It's user field, and that's really because Infor's been in the healthcare space and had the largest install in the healthcare space for years. So I caution customers when they start looking, right, perhaps at shiny objects and they get sold, right? Because that's what's happening when they're talking to these competing products, is they're getting sold. I challenge you to really look down at the healthcare functionality that really makes a difference in how you conduct your business. Anyone can do a GL entry. Anyone can do an AP invoice. That's not healthcare.
Yeah.
That's back office operations. Healthcare gets
Right.
defined by some of these features and functionality listed here, and I challenge you to look for these features in some of these other packages. So, and that just comes from the years in the space. And then I love this slide. Maybe you could share a little bit about this, where it's transferring kind of the business of healthcare and relating it to the human component in the HCM module. That's so strong.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to. So, really here at Infor, the tagline we've been using in healthcare is that we're about connecting the business of healthcare with the mission of healthcare. So we're clearly not your EHR, but we very, very much see, and our clients are actually asking us to be that platform for all the non-clinical systems. And then, of course, the connectivity that we have with Cloverleaf and Clinical Bridge to your clinical HR, clinical EHR, which then allows you to have not just an ERP system and an EHR system, but actually really get you to the point where you have an actual healthcare system, right? Which is what you want. And by having a healthcare system, then you can do this kind of stuff, right? You can talk about care affordability, because I know what's happening on the clinical side, and I can relate it then to the costs that are being consumed. And so to do that, I have the whole finance suite. I have your supply chain suite. I can pull in the HR, the workforce side of this, and I can then start to be able to tell you what those costs of care are. I can create workflows that take you from supplies being identified for consumption in the EHR all the way through our supply chain. And if you've got it set up so that we have, preferred suppliers, that can be completely touchless from when the signal is made that the supply is being consumed all the way through to the actual automated ordering on the back end. So just truing out that whole workflow so it doesn't even require human intervention. And frankly, if you don't have to log into Infor systems to be able to do your workflows, frankly, all the better, right? So all of that capability, just to highlight on the human potential side, is a lot of people don't know we have a full workforce management suite. All the time and attendance and scheduling and labor forecasting, as well as acuity-based scheduling, healthcare-specific acuity-based scheduling within that workforce management suite. We're finding more and more clients are turning to us instead of the major vendor in that space, because, right, not only do we have the capability, but it's all just, fully a part of the overall CloudSuite healthcare. So that, completeness of that suite, the completeness of that platform aimed at, your care affordability, aimed at, the business of healthcare to support your mission, is really where all of our R&D dollars are going, and really what we're really about here in terms of providing this whole suite of capability.
I love it. And I challenge folks when they attempt to break this in any way, meaning they go, well, we'll use this system for these modules and this system for that. I challenge you to think about the journey you're sending your employees on when you tell them, oh, go apply in iSIMS, go do your payroll in API, go do your workforce management in Kronos, get your talent science from Vizier, go do your learning management and SuccessFactors, go do your global HR and Workday. Oh, and then, go do this, right? And then I often share a story where I had a CHRO of a large healthcare company come to me, and he goes, we have the best of everything, and our experience is horrible. Why is that? And I said, look, you did this best of breed thing, and you sent your employees on a treasure hunt to try to do their jobs. And then you wonder why, your opinion surveys come back and they say, this is horrible. The technology is horrible. The individual technology isn't horrible. but the experience of the use of that technology, because it's not integrated, because you chose not to leverage the single platform. Whereas here, you kind of have it all in one, right? You're able to deliver a great experience and check all the boxes, with one platform and get a great experience. So it's awesome.
That's right. And that's what we're hearing, right? This community slide, right, is really about how we have been committed to the success of so many of these great clients here. And we're hearing from some of them, like, Freighter, where they have the same strategic approach on the non-clinical systems, i.e. Infor, as they do on the clinical systems, that being, hey, if 85% of the needed functionality can be provided by that system, Epic on one side and Infor on the business side, 85% of that functionality can be provided, we're sticking with that system. Because they recognize, back to your point, Michael, the value of the integration is such that it's better to get it all on one platform. And that's then what allows you to build on top of that platform with analytics. It allows you to create that consistent user experience, which means it's easier for people to use the darn system, which means it's easier for them to get the full value out of the system, which is what you paid for, right? The other thing about community, right, is we've got all of these great clients. They're helping us in terms of, when I talk about, bringing in best practices and really it's not just the best practices of today, but it's those maturing practices over time. It's not, guys like me and at Infor that are figuring that out. It's all these great clients here and you, right, that are out there all day, every day, delivering clinical care and helping us think through how do we continue to mature and advance these solutions. Because as you guys know, healthcare is a fast-moving, ever-evolving space. The only way we maintain that value and that relevance is by that alignment that we have with such a great community. Michael?
I love it. As an app guy, right, and I've managed app portfolios that have ranged up over 1,500 apps across a large enterprise. When folks talk to me and they say, how do we drive value? How do we, the number one thing I always say is the easiest way is to get rid of your licensing costs by reducing your portfolio of apps. And so when you think about that and you think, okay, I need to reduce how many apps I have, you have to have a base that you're consolidating to that has the robustness to absorb that functionality. So going back again to, Infor built for healthcare, having all that healthcare functionality, you can get rid of your budgeting and planning tool. You can get rid of all these ancillary systems and save all that licensing revenue, all that integration cost, all that maintenance cost, all the reporting costs. Everything becomes easier. And so oftentimes we're focused on, a licensing agreement and we perceive that to be the only cost. And I challenge you that is 10% of your actual cost. Your cost comes in the maintenance and in the integration to all your other systems. That's where your true cost comes from. And your benefit and your enablement comes from the ease of reporting and how you drive that data out of that one system across your organization. So I think we've got some really good information there on that first question. The second question that we always get is, well, this is so expensive, I'm going to have to do an RFP. I personally have put out a bunch of what I consider thought leadership on my blog, techprounicorn.com, specific around this. I wrote an article called Healthcare ERP because people act like, there's some big unknown out there, right? Like, we've got to go figure this out. The space hasn't changed that much. Realistically, 10 years ago, if you were looking for an ERP and you were in healthcare, you generally looked at PeopleSoft or what was Lawson. And that's what you chose. PeopleSoft is now kind of rebranded into some sort of Oracle product, was Fusion. Now I think it's Oracle Cloud. And then we have a new entrant really from our friends at Workday, which is kind of this new shiny object, right? So you're really left again with 3 products out there for healthcare, unless you're really small and you want to go play around with like NetSuite, or you're really risky and you want to go play around with some of the smaller vendors like a SuccessFactors or an API or a Kronos, but those aren't full ERP suites. Those are more HCM solutions. So you're really left with 3. And it kind of mind boggles me that folks are still into this, like, well, we want to go out and spend $300,000 doing an RFP and spend 3 to 4 months, when to me, right, and I can be a lot more loose-lipped perhaps than others can be in my position here, and I'm speaking more from my blogging persona when I put this out there. What folks, I think, are forgetting is it isn't just about looking for that lowest cost license revenue, right? It's really focusing on the functionality. And then if you were to move off your current platform, that loss of knowledge is hard to quantify. What cost do you associate with that? And what typically happens is people go, well, I don't want to learn a new pony, and so then they leave, right? Now you've got staff turnover, and then how do you educate your organization on this new change, this new software that everyone gets to go figure out, for everything from ordering supplies to payroll to submitting expense reimbursements. It's just pervasive across the entire organization. And so RFPs just by their nature become expensive. Large GSIs are charging, upwards of $200,000 just to run an RFP for you. And you really have to balance that with what benefit are you getting? And then you have to look at, like, what do you not know? Like, do you need to see it? Do you just need a demo? To me, go out and talk to folks that are using it and ask them. Go out and talk to folks that are using one of these shiny objects and ask them why they're not using the full suite of that shiny object. And why they can't do finance and supply chain as well. And the reality is, no other package is mature for healthcare across all suites, bar none. I said it. You can associate that tag with my name because I'll stand behind it, and I'll let Mark react to my rant.
So well said. I'm not sure what else to. But I'll tell you, one of the things I find kind of frustrating and maybe a little bit interesting about the RFP process is how undifferentiated it is. And by that I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I guarantee you that all the vendors that you see there can cut a check, they can void a check, right? They have a GL, you can make entries into the GL, right? And I get involved in these, where we're responding to these RFPs, and I see the list of what people want us to show. And honestly, since we're going to be loose-lipped here, I'm like, really? Really? You really think that one of us is going to come back to you and say, oh my God, I was afraid you were going to ask us to show you how we void a check because we don't have that functionality, right? It's just not about that. So all the core stuff, honestly, we can all do. And, maybe somebody has, a little bit of flavor of this or a little bit of flavor of that. Maybe somebody has a little feature, today that everybody else will have, next week. But that's really, that level, it's all pretty much the same. What I'd really invite you to consider is the kinds of things that Michael was talking about is, what are the real differentiators, right? And healthcare, we really are a business like no other. My favorite example, recall management, right? That is a whole different Megillah in healthcare. You can't say, oh, well, I'm going to take this process in other industries and just slap it into healthcare. And, how hard can that possibly be? And so in healthcare, it's a lot of things. It's the big things, like cost accounting, which in healthcare we've built out, but it's also 100 little things within supply chain, within, the hiring process, within even the financial process that if you don't get right, are going to frustrate the heck out of everybody, and it's going to be like a rock in your shoe that you're always having to deal with each and every day. So, you know, the thing about the RFP process is I get it. I get why people want to do it, but really you got to think about what are the true differentiators, what's the true value of that versus the cost of having to go do something else. And as Michael is pointing out, a lot of those soft costs around, what people know, the training, the relationships, all of that goes into it as well. So, I think there's a lot of reasons to think very carefully about whether that RFP really is necessary or not. So, Michael.
I love it. It's Michael and Mark being candid, open, and honest, right? I can't wait for the question and answers. We're going to get peppered. But, really, honestly, find a trusted advisor, right? Somebody in the space. I shared, right? I've done Workday, I've done Oracle, I've done PeopleSoft, I've done Infor, I've done Lawson. So ask somebody like that. It doesn't have to be me, right? And share your business drivers and what are you really trying to get out of your ERP. It's an exciting time to be an Infor ERP customer, and people kind of laugh at me when I say that. And with that, I'll kind of move us over to slide 3, or to the next question 3, where we're talking about what are the benefits. It's an exciting time to be an Infor customer because of CloudSuite. It's an exciting time finally to be a GL accountant, right? Because you're unhinged. If you can think about GL people being unhinged, I'm not quite sure that that's any much more different than being hinged. But the reality is, right, you get to really experience a world-class ERP product. And I know that's a bit of a slam towards legacy 10 and such, and it's not necessarily meant to be, but there's so many new features, functionalities, different ways of doing things. We're caught up, right? We're caught up with the rest of the competing products. So add to it all this functionality built for healthcare. I really question, right, like what the drivers are when people are like, well, we're going to go do an RFP and we're going to go look like what are you trying to do that you don't think you can do here? Because please share that with me. And again, since we're being this transparent and honest, right? Yeah, there's some bumps, right? CloudSuite's new, and we're on a little bit of a bumpy road. But if you think it's worth it not to ride the bumpy road, over this few short miles here, and you think going to a completely different solution and riding that road is less bumpy, I challenge you that it's not. So going back to kind of what Mark said around some of the things that Infor is putting in place to just make this faster, better, cheaper, and easier, maybe you could share with us, Mark, what we're looking at here with the 60-30-10.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. And this goes back to exactly what I was describing before, is that we really have come up with this sort of illustrative model around what your implementation experience will be in multi-tenant. And it starts with that core, right? Those core processes that are and should be very, very standard, right? Healthcare organizations can be very unique and have great value in their communities and unique value in their communities. But what does not make you guys unique is like how you do invoice processing, right? And that's not what makes you special as an organization. So all of that kind of stuff, and it's the stuff that I was just describing, all that, vanilla stuff, invoice processing, voiding checks, all that kind of stuff. There's no reason why that should have to be rebuilt each and every time you go out to do one of these implementations. So that roughly 60%, and frankly it's higher, but let's just for illustrative purposes call about 60%, that's, out of the box, that's pre-configured, that comes standard. Then there's roughly, say, 30% or less that is configured for your organization. You might be a standalone hospital, or you might be an IDN with 12 hospitals. You might do more with grants management versus not. I mean, there's a number of areas where you might need to have some configurations, and they're exactly that. They're configurations. If you haven't seen it, I'd invite you to look at how easily the system now is to configure. And being configured means that when we do updates in the cloud, those configurations are safe. That means they won't break. You'll be able to maintain those configurations in terms of how you're doing things. And then the last little bit is really around those processes that might be truly unique to you. You might have some unique union rules, or you might have some other thing that is truly unique. You might truly unique in your area or in your business or in the way that you work, and that should really then be the least part of it. And a lot of times when we do this with folks, that's really pushing zero, because we're finding that there's less and less that's truly that unique. But that's why, by going through it this way, by having our experience with all those predefined processes, with having our experience allow us to know, how to create a system that is highly configurable, it allows you to then to go into this in a way that allows you to do it much more quickly, be a much more adaptive process than, hey, let's get out a white sheet of paper and let's reinvent and reimagine how we do all these core business processes.
I love it. When I consult with a lot of the healthcare customers, and they tell me we're unique and such, I challenge them that you're not going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace by what ERP you use. As great as Infor is, your customers, your patients could care less if you're using Infor or Workday or right. But how you relate to your employees, right? How you get them in the right jobs through using a tool like Talent Science makes them happier and makes them perhaps serve your customers better, right? You could use that as potentially a differentiator. And then down at the bottom is a little unicornism. It's an article that I wrote called "If Your Value," you can't talk to me about value and then talk to me about some of these other ERPs, right? You just can't. I won't allow it. The unicorn in me will fester up, right? Because I oftentimes equate it to going and buying a pair of jeans, and you need a pair of jeans, and you have different places you can go to get that pair of jeans. At the end of the day, what's your need? A pair of jeans that lasts, that is of good quality, right? Now, I could go have a Nordstrom experience and get wined and dined in getting my pair of jeans that are going to, last me the exact same time. Or I could, go to maybe a Target or a Macy's, pay much less for that pair of jeans, and they're going to have the exact same net effect, right? So if value is your driver around your ERP, and it should be, right? We don't need the ERP to be the fanciest, glitziest, piece of software. We need it to function. We need it to meet our industry needs. We need it to do its job and do it well and do it reliably. So check out that article. I love this because we're continuing this theme of, why Infor versus some of these other ones. I challenge you to go out of those three that we kind of mentioned. One of them will have a competing product to this, but one of them glaringly will not. So I love Cloverleaf, and I think, to our healthcare customers out there that we're talking to, it's really kind of underused. And I think people don't know about it. I think people don't choose to understand it. They already have some sort of integration platform in place. And again, when you think holistically about your application landscape, and you make a commitment to say Cerner, right? You go all in on Cerner. You don't go, oh, well, this little bit in Cerner, this little bit in Epic, this little bit in Allscripts, this little bit, right? You go all Cerner or all Epic. And I challenge you that you need to think the same way about your ERP, right? You need to start understanding Ion. You need to start understanding Cloverleaf. and you need to understand what happens when you make all these connections and how this enables your ERP. So, and I've stolen a little bit of the thunder on this slide, Mark, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about Cloverleaf.
No, sure. Thanks for giving me that opportunity, because Cloverleaf really is a big part of the secret sauce within Infor. It is that interoperability platform. You can see the stats here on the slide. We connect, about a third of the Epic implementations. It's the same with Cerner. Hundreds of EMR systems, labs devices, GE Healthcare. It's Infor Inside on that one. And what that does is not only is it is an incredibly robust platform where places like HCA are running like 350 million transactions a day through it. It's also then that connectivity, when we talk about the interconnectivity between the business of healthcare and the mission of healthcare, this is it. You're looking at it, right? This is what enables us to create meaningful analytics in healthcare. And by that, I mean things like, okay, anybody can tell you, what your workforce costs are, and are those on or off budget? But in healthcare, you need to understand that with respect to your census, right? So if your census is high, it probably makes sense that your that your labor costs are high. If your census is low and your labor costs are high, that's a much more interesting thing to have to go after, right? But if you don't even have that sense of what is going on the clinical side that you would get from this kind of interoperability, you're really hampered in terms of understanding the real value of what that metric is really trying to provide for you. And of course, in the world of value-based care, that's the whole game, right? Is to be able to connect what you know on the clinical side with what you know on the operational side. And Cloverleaf and its sister Clinical Bridge, which is really the pre-packaged configurations, that's what does that for us. So yeah, we're super glad to have Cloverleaf, and like I said, it is the secret sauce within the Infor Healthcare platform.
I love it. And if you're sitting there listening to this and going, I don't know anything about Cloverleaf, we don't have it, don't feel overwhelmed by it, right? I always say dial a friend, right? Reach out to Mark, reach out to myself. We'll get the right people out to talk to you about it, and that's not a sales play. When I say Mark and I want to help, we want to enable you to focus on the mission of healthcare. We're not trying to push product on you in no way. So we want you to understand it and then make educated choices. And we're happy to share all of our years of experience being where you were, right? Both Mark and I come from healthcare providers sitting right where you were trying to figure all this out too. So we're happy to help in that capacity. We're just going to kind of breeze over this. But again, this slide really talks about all the components, right, that just come together when you really think about it holistically, right? And so many times we get called in and we're like, we don't want to talk about anything but the ERP upgrade. And you're just missing the opportunity, right? And it's not a sales play, but it's so hard to not seem salesy when you say you got to helicopter up and you got to look at all the aspects of running a hospital and running healthcare and think about it holistically and think about, because until you do that, you're never going to get the data analytics that you need to change what you're doing and to truly be inspirational. You're just going to do the same old. You're going to be pushing GL transactions through a brand new system. Oh, yay. The transformation really comes here.
Yeah, and this is I'm really glad you're showing the gang this, because we've talked a lot about the investments that Infor has already made into the product and into the solutions, but those investments continue. And this is a great example. We acquired a company that had been known as Intelligent Insights. We now call it location-based intelligence. And what that is, this is a pretty busy slide, but what it really is think of it as a software layer that sits on top of all the RFID, Wi-Fi, type of technology that you have within a hospital system. And what that does is then present a common API on top of all of that complexity, upon which we've built a whole bunch of apps. And this apps that do things like location tracking, so that you can so your nurses can more easily find things within the hospital. Track and trace functionality that has been instrumental for our clients where they've had infections like COVID or Ebola or others, so that you know who was there and what equipment they interacted with. It is supports clients in terms of making sure that the supplies that they have are staying within the hospital. They're not, going out the door or down the laundry chute or out the trash chute. It has shown enormous value in terms of provider healthcare systems working with organizations that rent them equipment, so that because they know better what rental equipment they're using or not using, and can then make better decisions in terms of their rental contracts. And those are enormous real dollar savings, and they're not just enormous real dollar savings for small hospitals, but our two biggest clients with this system are HCA and the Veterans Administration. So this solution here, this location-based intelligence, it is complementary to everything else that you've just heard, right? With our interoperability, with our asset management, with supply chain, with all of that. And it greatly extends then the notion of healthcare specific functionality that Infor continues to build on top of its already, complete platform, and is an example of the kinds of investments that we're continuing to make in this space. So if you're doing anything at all, if you have any interest at all in terms of, how you help your nurses, how you help your clinicians with any of the kinds of use cases that I just described, and there's many, many more, please let us know, because this is, we're incredibly excited by this acquisition. And I think this is just going to go like wildfire across our healthcare base. So thanks for showing this one, Michael, because this is the thing we're doing now.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's so funny because everybody has point solutions for all of these things, and
Right.
and kind of unconsolidated. Everybody out there has some sort of alert paging system. Everybody out there has some sort of, and maybe they don't, right? And maybe it's time to talk about RFID, with somebody, whether it's an Infor solution or not, right? But understanding where your equipment is in your facility is important. And I think, even COVID highlighted that, right? Like, how much equipment do we have? Where is it? And how do I mobilize it to where it's most needed? Those types of analytics showed an incredible weakness nationwide, right? We're not pointing to anyone else. Nationwide, we as a healthcare technology industry epically failed in that. And this is a huge step forward. It's an exciting space.
It really is. And
All
you
right.
think about, you start to play some of this forward, right? It just gets more exciting, right? As you start to take this and put better AI on top of it and all. There's the sky's the limit, but it only comes if you have the platform in the first place and you have the focus on healthcare to be able to provide the intelligence to make that all happen. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did talk over you.
Oh.
Next question.
No, that's all right. Yeah, it's an exciting time, like I shared. You got to get the blocking and tackling and the basics in, and then you can for sure, frost that cake and do some of these analytics that really enable your organization. They change it. It becomes a different culture when you can get to that point. So one of the last questions that we're getting a lot right now, kind of folks maybe were looking at CloudSuite and they were like, oh, that's 2022 or 2023, and then they're like, wait a minute. There's a lot of people moving. There's a lot of people going. Why should I go now? Should I go later? 10 isn't sunset yet. What do I do? when do I budget for it? And so, when we answer that question, when I respond to that, I usually say, your data is safer in the cloud. Your data is safer with Amazon than it is downstairs in your basement or your hospital. It might be a shocker, but I guarantee you Amazon runs a better data center than your IT department. And with data in the cloud comes access. And I think a lot of the CloudSuite customers really benefited in this work from home environment by being in the cloud and having that accessibility that perhaps some of the customers that aren't in the cloud yet really struggled with VPN tunnels and such, that are kind of solved with cloud. There are so many new features. Somebody asked me, they said, how many new features are there in supply chain? And I was like, well, this release, I'm putting together all these. I was over 3,000 new features on supply chain alone, and I just stopped counting, right? So there's new features, new ways to think about your business, and you need a partner that helps you not implement software, but transform your business. Because with 3,000 new features in supply chain, you really need to kind of blow up everything you're doing today and rethink it with all that new context in mind. I did a survey once at a seminar I was speaking at, about 100 people, and I asked them to raise their hands. I said, when was the last time you redesigned your business process? You're totally redesigned. Started green screen from the ground up. Was that a year ago? No hands. 5 years? No hands. 10 years? I got a couple hands. And it was 15 years before most of the hands went up. And I want you to think about what Lawson was 15 years ago and what CloudSuite is today. It is just night and day. I want you to think about what technology was, mobile technology, phone technology. Every aspect of technology was totally different. So it's an exciting time to rethink your entire way that you do business. And I often say Infor CloudSuite is not a competitive advantage, it's a competitive necessity. Why? Because your competitors are doing it, right? Mark showed a slide back there that said there's 75 customers on Infor CloudSuite. Those are your competitors, right? So they're taking advantage of the thousands of features and functionality that are better. They're able to reduce staffing. They're able to eliminate hardware. They have a lower total cost of ownership. They can scale with, automatically, right? Automatically, Amazon knows if they need more space or they need more server resources, and the scalability happens automatically. They have standardization because they've thought about their business processes. They don't have this part of the company doing it this way and this part doing it a different way. They've rethought all that. The ease of audit is better. You can turn on all the audit logs, right? Because space is cheap and it's on Amazon. So turn all that stuff on. The support for it, the performance for it. I sound like I'm slicing and dicing and chopping and pureeing, but it really is a differentiator in all those aspects, and your competitors are doing it. One of the things that I'm most excited about is the community aspect, right? Everyone moving on to one system, on one release. And it's funny because when you talk to a customer, another healthcare customer, and you go, "Hi, Mark, how are you? Hey, what system are you on? What version? What platform?
Right.
Oh, you're on Unix. Oh, we're on this, right?" And you have all these weird qualifying conversations before you can actually talk to see if you guys are the same. And now we're all going to be on CloudSuite, and we're all going to be in the same place on the same software doing the same thing. And then this is just a reality. Whether again, this is just straight talk, whether Infor wants to talk about this or not, the reality is, Mark said there's lots and lots of customers, right? They all got to go to CloudSuite. There is at some point going to be an implementation bottleneck where we've used the Infor ecosystem of consulting resources, both ICS and the entire partner community. It's going to become constrained, and the reality is you might have to wait, and now it's kind of the stand in line. And every partner community out there, including ICS, is scaling. But, I think the demand here is going to shift faster than we can scale. So I'll let Mark react to that.
Yeah, well, that once again, incredibly well said. I would try to add a couple other thoughts around that, right? So with cloud, he's right. You know, it is more secure. I guarantee you that Amazon has more people with PhDs in IT security than anybody else here, right? They have more folks that are spending all day, every day, trying to figure out how to hack their own systems. We have people that spend all day, every day, trying to figure out how to hack our systems so that they maintain that security. It's also high availability, right? In that, you know, there are multiple farms that Amazon has with failover. So all of this is built with high availability in mind, so you don't have to worry about going down. It's high security. It's the elasticity that Michael was just talking about. If you have this in-house, you have to build to your peak benefit season or your peak payroll. If you're in the cloud, it's all there, right? You're not having to worry about building to the peak. It scales up, scales down as necessary. I mean, there's just, you know, that's why everybody has gone to the cloud with all of this. And I'll just skip down to then what that means in terms of, say, community. So again, play this forward a little bit. As we get, you know, greater and greater numbers of folks on the cloud, what my clients are asking me for is benchmarking, right? How am I doing in my processing compared with others? Well, that's hard to do if, like as Michael said, everybody's running on a different environment, everybody's doing things a different way, everybody's, you know, kind of set up differently. But if I've got everybody 60-30-10 model, I've got them all in the cloud, you know, I can see what all is going on out there. I can actually then start to provide process intelligence, which we have, that can show us how you're doing relative to your peers, and very specifically be able to identify where you're out of alliance with those peers and be able to come back to you with some very, very specific recommendations of areas that you can improve. One of the things I love about the healthcare industry is how much healthcare is willing to partner and share in terms of things like best practices, right? You don't have, you know, I don't know, Toyota and BMW trying to compare, hey, how do you guys run your factories? Hey, who does that more efficiently? Right. But healthcare will, right? You guys will sit down with each other and say, hey, how can we, you know, all figure this out together? So I think as an industry, it's a really neat thing about the industry. And I think that one of the kind of neat little benefits that the cloud is going to have, and then being a community-based industry, is that ability to benchmark, and that ability for us all to rise in terms of ever greater efficiency over time. So that's the only other big thing I would add to this, is just where all this will eventually head in the next few years. But he's also right. I mean, we've got about 400 clients in healthcare. So 400 moving to cloud over the next 4 years, you know, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot. So we're going to be working very carefully with all of you if you give us that privilege to get you there. So it's going to be a great journey in the next few years.
Awesome. And I kind of summarized the benefits of cloud, right, in that article down below. It's an article out there called Breaking Through the Clouds, The Truth About Cloud ERP. And it just kind of breaks down, you know, what the pros and cons are, because there are some cons that you should be aware of. But I can tell you, nobody's beating down the doors to put their ERP on-prem, right? Everybody's pretty much sold on the cloud. So with that in our wrap-up, I want to highlight the next tech talk coming up. That's analytics for CloudSuite and more. It's Aaron Epps and Rob Kraus from Infor. If you have questions about what are analytics, right? It's great to implement and get all the data in and capture it, but the secret sauce there also is getting the data out in a meaningful way. They're going to highlight Burst. Burst is exciting. If you haven't seen Burst, I challenge you to go look at Burst. It is a competitive product with any other leading reporting software out there, and it's integrated into your CloudSuite offering, as well as extended beyond that should you need it. So make sure you get on to that one. And with that, I want to thank you, Mark, and for taking the time. And I think we were pretty transparent. And if folks have questions, we will take those in the chat at this time, and we're happy to respond to those. But again, thank you, Mark, for making the time and joining us.
And thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me here, and thanks everybody for attending today. Look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, and we have been getting some questions throughout the presentation, so I want to thank everyone for being interactive. It sure makes for a great presentation. So coming from our friends at Yuma Regional, they asked a really great question, and I'll just read it verbatim, and then we can go ahead and respond to it. And they say, we have pretty much everything from Infor under the sun. However, not all of the modules are as good as you get with different vendors, right? Versus the best of breed versus the consolidated. i.e., we have found that the employee health module is not as good as our third-party vendor. They offer much more flexibility and integration with other systems. So we try not to fragment our users, but sometimes the UX is just better on the other systems. How is Infor addressing this? And it's funny that you picked employee health, because one, I think every healthcare customer struggles with who even owns this, right? Is this owned by IT? Is this owned by some sort of the medical side of it? Is it owned by HR? So ownership of that is, I've seen it owned by legal. So employee health is for sure always a challenge, and it's a good call out, because I think the Infor product doesn't have a great solution in here. So it's a good example for us to talk about. And Mark, I'll let you share your thoughts as well.
Yeah, well, I'll say a couple things, right? So you're right. There's always going to be, the decision to be made around, do you want to go best of breed, or, do you want to have an integrated platform? And, there's certainly, as we were talking before, a lot of advantages to having an integrated platform, but there's always going to be, niche providers out there that might have a better or a slicker way to do a particular piece of functionality. I'll tell you though, I'm seeing a lot of clients moving more towards the integrated platform idea. I've seen them do that on the clinical side, and they're doing that more and more on this business operations side. The client that has the strategy that 85% of the if 85% of functionality can be performed by the platform, they stay with the platform. And whether that's Epic on the clinical side or us on the operational side, that's their strategy, because they realize the benefit of that integration and is so much higher than having a bunch of one-off systems that you have to integrate, as we were talking about before. With respect to the UX, that has been a huge area of R&D for Infor the past several years as we've been building out the multi-tenant cloud solution. So if you haven't seen it yet, I would really invite you to take a look at the latest UX. And it's not just in terms of screen flow UX, but mobility. There's a whole Infor Go platform that supports mobility on all sorts of devices and improved workflows around all of that. There's a whole UX now around voice. So the ability to actually talk to the application and ask it to do things in a very hands-free way. So it's not only just in terms of, better look and feel, but also better workflow, better support for mobility and more advanced technologies that you like voice UX. But, again, if you haven't seen it, really invite you to go take a look, talk to your, client results executive, schedule some time so you can get a demo and so you can actually see these new capabilities, because everybody who's seen it is incredibly impressed.
Awesome, thank you. The other thing I'd like to suggest is I often say, right, the easiest path to solving a problem is ignoring the problem and going somewhere else, right? So if it has functionality that's lacking that you need, contribute, right? Join the fight, become part of the solution, and let's change it. Make sure that enhancement requests are getting channeled in. I've seen Infor be very collaborative and work on solutions that benefit the greater good with a particular client. So volunteer to help develop that functionality that then benefits the greater good. It's kind of that power of us all being in the same community, right? Making the software better for all of us. That healthcare is just so good at collaborating and sharing on. So the next question we had is in relation to the RFP that we talked about, and they said, without an RFP, how do we know what's out there? Can you suggest ways to do it? And the way I'd like to address this is kind of what we did at my time at Dignity Health. We didn't do an RFP. We kind of did an RFI. We said, hey, vendors that we think we're interested in, right, by going to the likes of Gartner and saying, hey, Gartner, for healthcare, who are the leading healthcare players? And if you don't have a Gartner subscription, that's okay, because you can go out and simply download the latest ERP report. There's other agencies out there besides Gartner, but it's pretty easy to survey the landscape depending on your size and know who is a potential player, again, in healthcare. And I can tell you, really, you're going to wind up looking at the likes of Workday, Infor, and Oracle. And once you've narrowed it to that field, right, it's pretty easy to drive deep there, either by talking direct to those vendors and understanding their capabilities, and comparing it to what you already know. Now, remember to compare it to CloudSuite. So a lot of this is coming from our V10 install base, and it's important to realize you're going to be on CloudSuite. So don't compare it to today. Compare it to where you're headed, and then really, saving that time and just doing it internally, right, and sharing it collaboratively between IT and the business. On your journey, right? Make sure that you're partnered with the business, or if you're IT, that you're supporting the business in really looking at this, and really look at the requirements like Mark and I hit down. It's really easy to get kind of glossed over and look at the pretty pictures and the beautiful screen, of which now CloudSuite has its own great look, but really focus on what systems can do the core functionality you need. Who does employee health better, or who do you think is going to have an employee health solution faster? Because you're going to find in some cases all the platforms are lacking something in some way. There is no perfect solution, or we'd all be on it. So everyone is stronger in something. And so that's kind of the journey we did. We did some initial research, we narrowed the field, and then we drove deep ourselves there. So that's just a way cheaper and often faster path to figuring out what your strategy is. And again, I'm happy offline to talk to anybody about helping you with an application portfolio strategy. It's just an area of passion that I have. So Mark, I'll let you react to that same question.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer, Michael. Yeah, and I would, again, as we were talking about before, I would look at the areas that are truly differentiating. So as you're doing, you should certainly do some due diligence review. But again, we can all do the basic functionality. Look at the things that are most important for you in terms of healthcare, and consider how critical some of these processes are, like around supply chain, et cetera, and consider how much maturity is required to be able to deliver that within healthcare. So, supply chain in general is a 24/7 critical part of the enterprise in healthcare, unlike it is in a lot of other industries. So I would yeah, I'd encourage you to get some information, but I would also, ask you to think about some of the areas that we were just talking about in terms of true differentiation in the healthcare industry.
Awesome. Another question that came in when we were talking about kind of that roadmap and these integrations and all these different systems, how can we trust that Infor will deliver? And it's probably easier for me to be a little more informal than perhaps Mark. But I would honestly say, look at the investment that Infor is making right now. Right, not you're going to have to unhinge some of this historical baggage, and you're going to have to. I challenge you to just look now, look post Coke investment, and evaluate that for yourself. And I'll let Mark kind of expand upon that into some of the investments that are being made.
Yeah, sure. So as noted, right, you look at what we've delivered in the past, couple of years, few years in terms of functionality that's been delivered on time, and has greatly advanced the platform. So it's not for us, right? It's not just about building the platform. The platform's built. It's about all those capabilities that we were talking about before that we're advancing the platform. And you look back the past few years, we've been making successive improvements to all of that. So we have that track record in the cloud. And as Michael's just noting, right, with the capital investment from Coke, we're now the best capitalized a software company out there. And Coke is incredibly, and the reason why they did this, right, is because they were incredibly interested in our success and have a record of investment. So in terms of our ability to have, the capital required to keep pace with this fast evolving industry, we're incredibly well positioned to continue to do that. And, the other example is the one we were just talking about, which is our investment in location-based, intelligence. So it's, looking at where are those areas of adjacency that we can look to continue to build upon the platform. And, that's being delivered today. So if there's any doubts, right, just take a look at, what's been coming out and what continues to come out, and know that there's, capital reserves to continue to keep that pace of investment.
Awesome. And we've got one last question. It's a bit of a technical question. And so Mark and I might not be able to take a deep dive on this one, but can Cloverleaf be utilized to real-time interface S3 version 10 on-prem, and how well does it function until the ERP can be upgraded? And Mark, I don't know if you want to test your technical chops on that one, or if perhaps we want to respond to Bill separately.
Well, if I understand the question, I mean, Cloverleaf is being used with S3 version 10 today, all day, every day. That's what, frankly, that's what folks like HCA are using it, or have been using it with. And that is real time. If you understand what Cloverleaf is, it's really I hate to diminish it, but it's really an information bus that's sending HL7 and other messages real time between clinical systems and devices. So that is exactly what it does all day, every day. I think I mentioned before that's 350 million some odd transactions a day going through that at HCA. So yeah, absolutely. And then of course, absolutely, it functions against the newer platform as well. The clients that you saw about 75 clients that we have today on CloudSuite. Not all of those are using Cloverleaf, but many of them are. And
it works, just as effectively in the connecting up to the multi-tenant cloud environment as it does running on-prem. That's, part of how we architected it. We have a huge investment and a large number of clients on Cloverleaf, so we knew we had to architect all of this so that would in fact work, and it does, right? Otherwise we would be, disenfranchising our own clients, which of course we're not going to do. So yeah, no, that all works great.
Awesome. Well, this has been incredible. We're 10 minutes over, and we still have 36 people that have hung out with us over the time slot. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to thank you again, Mark. And with that, if you have additional questions, I invite those to go ahead and come in at questions@rpic.com, and we're happy to send those to Mark and get those back to you if needed, or answer them directly. So with that, I want to again thank you all for your questions, your interaction, your participation, your time, and your interest in making this better. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for spending the time with us. Thank you.